Sometimes things happen on tape that cannot quite be captured by the transcript. Sometimes things happen on tape that you have to see on tape to really understand what they are. Por ejemplo, Democrat Chris Coons and Republican Christine O'Donnell are both running for Senate in Delaware. They participated in a debate this morning in which they had an exchange that's already been written up everywhere but the penny saver. It's been written up and transcribed and verbated everywhere. It was about the First Amendment, about what's in the Constitution. And when you read the text of their exchange about it, it's remarkable enough. It's remarkable enough that Christine O'Donnell seems to be challenging Chris Coons's true assertion that the separation of church and state is laid out in the First Amendment to the Constitution, the part where it says religion and government have to be different things. That is a true statement about what happened in the debate. Reading the transcript of what happened, that describes it. But when you look at the tape, it is clear that there was so much going on here.
One of those indispensable principles is the separation of church and state.
Okay, with that, very good dialogue. We appreciate that. Let's move on so we can get to all the panelists and cover a number of areas. Jen Live from the News Journal, please, if you could ask the next question, please.
Where in the Constitution is the separation of church and state?
The First Amendment establishes the separation, the fact that the federal government shall not establish any religion, and decisional laws, Supreme Court, over many, many decades, clarifies and enshrines that there is a separation of church and state that our courts and our laws must respect.
So you're telling me that the separation of church and state, the separation of church and state is part of the First Amendment?
The thing you don't get from just reading that exchange that you do get from the tape is that she thinks she's just won. She thinks she's got one over on Chris Coons there. She's just scored a huge, giant political touchdown. She nailed him. Stick a fork in Chris Coons. He is donezo. This joker thinks the First Amendment has something about religion in it.
Where in the Constitution is the separation of church and state?
Turn and smile at the crowd. The crowd is laughing at you. Christine O'Donnell is hearing that and thinking, yeah, I know, my goodness, that guy. She doesn't understand that the crowd is laughing at her because she doesn't really believe that he knows what he's talking about. She thinks she has nailed her opponent on this point. That's why she repeated it. That's why she went back to it. In Christine O'Donnell's mind, Chris Coons is wrong. The First Amendment doesn't say anything about religion and government being separate. For the record, this is what the First Amendment says. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. The top, once again for emphasis, no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That is what we now call the separation of church and state. What's clear here is that to Christine O'Donnell, having been a lifelong conservative activist and perennial far-right candidate, this is news. And that is why this is more than somebody just getting something wrong about the Constitution or having an awkward exchange with an audience who thinks it's laughing about something that the candidate doesn't think she's laughing about. This is a window into right-wing world. It's also Glenn Urquhart, the Republican candidate for Delaware's open house seat.
Do you know, where does this phrase, separation of church and state, come from? Does anybody know? Actually, that exact phrase is not in Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists. He was reassuring them that the federal government wouldn't trample on their religion. The exact phrase, separation of church and state, came out of Adolf Hitler's mouth. And that's where it comes from. So the next time your liberal friends talk about separation of church and state, ask them why they're Nazis.
Ask them why they're Nazis. It's also Republican Sharon Angle running for Senate in Nevada. She also attends the same schools.
The separation of church and state arises out of the Constitution.
No, it doesn't,
the Founding Fathers didn't believe in the separation of church and state.
Actually,
the Establishment Clause, the First Amendment.
Actually, Thomas Jefferson has been misquoted like I've been misquoted out of context.
Thomas Jefferson actually not misquoted enough for some conservatives. You'll remember that this spring, Texas conservatives managed to cut Thomas Jefferson from a list of figures whose writings inspired revolutions in the late 18th century and 19th century, replacing him with St. Thomas Aquinas, John Calvin, and William Blackstone, because they were upset about Jefferson and the whole separation of church and state thing. You know, it's not that some people can't remember what is in the Constitution. It's not that we have a disagreement about interpretation. It is that in right-wing America and in the rest of America, we are now working with two different sets of facts. Joining us now is Anna Marie Cox, Washington correspondent for GQ magazine. Anna Marie, it's delightful to have you back. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Rachel.
The Christine O'Donnell exchange was striking to me because she was making meaningful eye contact with the audience that was audibly gasping and laughing and sort of snickering at her assertions about the Constitution.
Right. She didn't quite do a wink, but it was almost a wink. It was an
implied wink.
Yes.
But are there enough people who agree with her about what the facts are about separation with church and state that this will be a net positive for her somehow?
It will be a net positive for her in that I think that she will have a career after she loses this election badly. I mean, she shouldn't, but we are looking at baby Palin in the making right here. This is an embryonic form of Palin. She is not yet winking, but she is doing the dog whistle. She is making the right sounds and the right noises. And I think what's sad about this particular example, as you point out, she does seem to take the audience's reaction as a positive one. I think for people who are bullies and for people who are preaching kind of ignorance, there's no reaction you can give that they won't take as a positive one. I think the only reaction that they don't like is no reaction at all. If the audience had catcalled her, I think she would have taken it as a positive. And the sad thing is the kinds of people who agree with her would have taken it as a badge of honor to be shamed by the people in the audience.
And that's the foundation for future political growth,
yes.
That you wear the derision as a badge of honor. And
exactly.
So the more derision, the better.
Right. And so I think that she might have been slightly confused. Well, obviously, she is very confused about a lot of things. Mice with men's brains, the Constitution, pleasuring oneself, however you might want to do that. She's very, very confused about a lot of things. But I think that she might have been confused that she assumed the audience was laughing with her.
Yeah.
I think she probably assumed that they would have a negative reaction, but it doesn't matter to her. Again, she's doing these things for attention, and she believes so deeply in what she's already doing. The facts don't matter, and I think that's the point you're trying to make. This is a widespread meme on the right. This idea that the separation of church and state is not something that the founding fathers believed in, and it's true. The exact words do not appear in the Constitution. The exact words separation of church and state do not appear in the Constitution. However, it's been enshrined in decision after decision after decision. It is part of our national heritage. And to misread it like this, I was going to call it a willful misreading of the Constitution, but that gives them too much credit.
Well, we're also in a point, though, where there are different sets of facts, that it's not just taken as an argument about the Constitution. It's taken as a set of facts that conservatives believe, and then there is a set of facts that liberals believe, and never the twain shall meet. So therefore, you can't debate. You can make assertions, you can be catcalled or hooted at or applauded for your assertions, but there's no grounds on which we can find the truth.
Right. You can't even go back to the original document and talk about that.
Yeah.
Because it isn't an even interpretation. You're right. It's not an argument about what the founders intended. It's a complete perversion. Right. Of what the founders intended. I mean, like, as I'm sure you know, there's a legitimate argument about the Second Amendment, about what the founders intended about the Second Amendment, and the article itself can be kind of vague. This article, the First Amendment, is not vague.
Right. Right. Exactly. And it's the sort of thing
very little to interpret about
and
the
it's
First
the sort
Amendment.
of thing that a lot of people have memorized, at least the top part.
Yes.
You know?
Although she, at least to her credit, she admits she had not memorized it. She said that senators are not required to. Although now I think maybe we could start that. Maybe we should start that. Yes.
Anna Marie Cox, Washington correspondent for GQ magazine. It is very nice to see you, my friend. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.